At some point throughout your schooling history, you've heard of the story before. Even today, any basic economic textbook will tell you of how back in the ancient times, before the creation of money, man used to trade and barter. If you had shirts and needed spears, you'd have to find a neighborhood spear maker. But not just any spear maker, they'd need to be willing to trade the weapons for shirts. It was a bit of a hassle and way too complex, but for small communities, this basic system of barter was enough to get you what you needed. People eventually wised up and standardized the process through physical money, and thus money was born. Adam Smith was the first to popularize the idea of an ancient barter system in 1776. To Adam Smith, it was something innate in humanity, the propensity to truck, barter, and exchange one thing for another. It might seem like a topic with little relevance to today, but the story of trade had fundamentally changed how we came to view the world around us. The drive to maximize value through barter became an innate biological behavior. Humans eat, groom, and barter. Too bad no one bothered to fact-check Adam Smith, because he was completely wrong. Within communities, people actually lived under gift economies. Going back to the shirts and spears, instead of bartering, you'd find your neighborhood spear guy, and the exchange would go something like this. Hey, nice spear. Oh, this old thing? It's alright, but if you like it, take it. Thanks, guy. And that was it. There was nothing you had to exchange back, just the knowledge that you would have your neighbor's back if you needed something was enough. When trading with people outside of your village, that's when barter would occur. While trade rituals varied endlessly by different traditions, these were often tense and violent encounters. No matter how amicable people were on the outside, barter meant preparing for potential battle if an individual felt swindled. A world where everyone's at each other's throats is unsustainable, and barter is necessarily competitive. Which is why the overwhelming amount of trade throughout human history has occurred via gifts. I mean, if the world related entirely through impersonal trade, we wouldn't see the end of conflict, wars, and... oh shit! So without this as the origin of money, where did it come from? Well, it's impossible to precisely say how money began to be used, but there's no shortage of evidence that the evolution of the state and money were deeply interlinked. In fact, the very first records of writing are, astoundingly, financial and tax records. A prevailing theory holds that as warlords acquired more and more land, they would declare a set currency like crude gold or silver, pay their soldiers with it, and force conquered people to accept it. So right out the window, the naturalistic theory of the origins of money goes. Karl Marx dubbed ancient human civilizations primitive communism for their adherence to from each according to their ability to each according to their need, and it has received endorsement by modern anthropologists. So why is the myth so enduring when we stopped teaching female inferiority and native savagery ages ago? The answer is a whole lot more cynical than you might think. Modern capitalist philosophy was built upon these lies. Existing economic systems don't have to be justified if they're an extension of natural human relations, if it's just the way the world works. The economic sphere, the market, all this can be separated from anthropology and sociology into its own scientific sphere. Sure, capitalism might not be the greatest, but if we hold these myths to be true, then modern capitalism, with all its highfalutin tech and stocks, is just window dressing over what really is a primordial system. Rational choice theory remains a widely held view in the Western world. It holds that humans are naturally rational actors who aim to maximize their benefits at the cost of everyone else. Yet this is false, overwhelmingly so. But try telling the capitalists and libertarians that money is only possible through the state, and they'll probably faint in shock. And so the reality of history has been mainly confined to academia, and I guess YouTube videos. But without rational choice, what's left? Daddy Marx doesn't have all the answers either. In fact, his theory of history is a bit of a simplified fairy tale. Renowned anthropologist David Graeber goes into depth on how primitive communism has remained with us, even to today. But this requires a bit of a culture shock. Egoism and altruism, as we understand them, aren't biologically ingrained things. They're a relatively new phenomenon. Pretty blasphemous, right? We tend to order all of our interactions on an egoist or altruist dichotomy. Market and business affairs, egoist. Family and friends, mainly altruist. And even sociologists have spent decades finding ways to explain even selfless behavior as narcissism in disguise. But in cultures without markets, money, or private property, they generally lack the concepts and language to describe selfish and selfless behavior. On the other hand, they have much more nuanced language to describe envy, solidarity, pride, and the like. Peculiar behavior to us, like a family amassing massive wealth only to give it all away to their rivals to humiliate them, is just one example of the range of behaviors that don't quite fit the egoist-altruist mold. Yet this ideological hole we're stuck in makes sense. If we live in a society where the economic mode requires us to be entirely selfish and focus on acquiring capital in business affairs, the later emergence of world religions and philosophy that reject egoism and materialism in social affairs as a response seems inevitable. Total altruism as a concept is only possible as a response to total egoism. So to recap, without the myth of the barter and the origins of money, we see that economic relations are not confined to their own scientific sphere, but are just another aspect of human relations that can be analyzed anthropologically or sociologically. And through thorough analysis of cultures that have forgone slave, feudal, and capitalist developments, we see that holding altruism and egoism as the primary and natural form of human existence is inadequate. Like I mentioned earlier, in gift economies, when Spear Guy gave you his spear, there's an expectation of solidarity, a knowledge that you would and will do the same for Spear Guy when he's in need. Unlike in market economies where this exchange is quantified formally through money or credit, in gift economies, the spirit of solidarity is what drives primitive communism forward. But instead of what Marx had theorized, primitive communism didn't see a decisive end with the onset of slave societies. Let's define communism more broadly as the spirit of solidarity. Graeber dubbed this definition base communism, a recognition of our ultimate interdependence, that is the ultimate substance of social peace. By digging deeper, we actually find that this is still the primary way we relate to each other. Think of any interaction you've had where you gave to others in which the thought of keeping tabs would be so ludicrous as to be offensive. When was the last time you refused to open the door for a stranger unless you were compensated? The last time you engaged in hard barter in a group project to ensure you worked the least? Or the last time you demanded payment for the emotional labor you give your friends and loved ones? Never, because that's ridiculous. We don't give each other enough credit. We engage in basic communism, social solidarity every day, attuned to small social injustices and giving the slightest hints of amicability with strangers. We do this much more than we engage in social capitalism or egoism in the market. The only thing that's changed from ancient times is that we've accepted the economy as a distinct space where we are allowed to perform our egoism. We've bought into the myth of the barter. But that's a lie that, increasingly, we can't continue to hold.